So, Michael, thank you very much for making time to share your insights into the future of leadership. But before we go into the future, can you tell us a little bit about your own background? I know you grew up in Ireland, you moved to Boston, you're based in Boston today. And what was your dream career when you grew up?
I thought I was going to be a chef, believe it or not. And that never really materialized, but that was one of the aspirations, was that I would be a chef when I was probably a teenager.
And who inspired you in your early days?
Yeah, in my early days, I was a big fan at the time of snooker, and I played a lot of snooker. Played for Dublin, and was kind of a mid-level amateur. And there was a famous snooker player called Alex Higgins, and I used to follow him and go to see his tournaments. And he was one of those ones like George Best or some of these guys that are fundamentally brilliant and fundamentally flawed. So you never knew what would happen. One minute he could be completely brilliant, and the next minute it was a complete disaster. But he was always incredibly exciting to watch. So I kind of, I was amazed by someone who can be so talented and so flawed and so challenged with drugs and alcohol and so forth, and still could rise to the occasion and dominate the world in his sport. Struck me as as an interesting story.
Now, Michael, you've got a very impressive profile. You've got a very impressive career in sales and marketing. You started your career at Polaroid, and then you joined Reebok. And today you are the founder of Go-To-Market Pros. Michael, looking back over your career, can you maybe share a couple of highlights?
Yeah, it's interesting. As you learn more and build more skills, and see more and get more experience, you want to have more impact on things. You want to have more control on the strategic direction of companies and how they evolve and how they grow. And one of the things I learned in these very big companies is, you're really only working on one very small aspect of things. And so much of these very big companies, the people that spend 10, 20, 30 years there, have the great political skills, great internal networking skills, and they're less involved in the impact on the market and on growing the market. So I got kind of tired of the multi-layered bureaucracy of the politics, and wanted to kind of work with younger, fresher companies that were much more focused around how do we build great products and get them to market, and much more innovative about what they do. So I've worked with a series of emerging growth and startup companies. They may be 5 million, you're looking to build them to 50 million, you're looking to kind of, build them to 100 million and those type of things, and find it much more interesting when I'm working with the founders and the real true innovators in the product area versus, one person in a channel marketing group. Someone told me the other day, my marketing team is really small. I only have 181 people. I'm like, what? That's a massive amount of people. Some of the organizations that I work with might have, one part-time person or one small consulting. And so they have to be very focused about what they do. So I enjoy kind of that. And I also found that a lot of companies really need help with go-to-market strategy. And they're not that connected a lot of times to the market. They haven't really validated their offering. So a lot of times I'll set up prospect meetings for them and we'll walk through their product proposition, not necessarily trying to sell it at that point. It may result in a sale, but really to say, is this relevant? Or how could it be more relevant? Or what's the level of interest? And nearly ask the prospect, how would you advise that we would bring a product like this to market? How would we get your attention? And how would we prove this proposition for you? So kind of bringing people into those much more strategic, thoughtful discussions is much more interesting to me than being kind of a cog in a wheel at some very large corporation.
Now, Michael, you're also a board facilitator for the likes of Salesforce, Accenture, and P&G. Can you tell us a little bit more about that role?
Yes. So what I do for those type of companies is, they'll be bringing, in the case of P&G, they're bringing a new product to market. It was actually launched. It was going to be launched in Japan initially, but then worldwide, and it was a new kind of a face mask technology, which was going to be used in the beauty market, and the company didn't have a product like that in market. And it's a very, very specific area. So we pulled together a panel of 20 to 30 experts. They cut across people coming from cosmetics retail to coming from the cosmetics industry, the beauty industry, people with knowledge of the AP market and the Japanese market. And so we pulled together a panel of experts to help us develop, fine tune, and optimize a go-to-market strategy, so that when they went to market, they felt like they had outside-in thinking. So I do a lot of work. I've done a lot of work with Accenture on the future of retail, what that's going to look like, how that's going to change and evolve. And so it's really around, helping to get a rapid feedback simultaneously across the world 24/7, with a platform that can get them insights that they never would get, and allow them to make better decisions, or allow them to inform their client of what's going on and things like that. So it's kind of it's a very advanced form of focus group, but it's not a 1 hour slot. It's it could run for a month or 2 months, and the themes change every week or so, and we're evolving the discussion. It all gets captured and documented by a video and transcript, so they can share that then internally with the company, so it doesn't become, the loudest voice wins in these meetings, or it doesn't become the highest paid person wins. It becomes, here's what the market wants, here's a good sense of where to start, and here's a really independent assessment of kind of how to move forward on a business initiative. So I do a lot of that type of board work with those companies.
And Michael, looking back over your career, would you say there was a major turning point where things could have gone different?
Yeah. I guess one of the major turning points for me was, I was working in an organization, and I'd grown it from 5 or 10 million to about 60 million. And, we needed to, at that time, marketing automation was really starting to take off. There was tremendous efficiencies for part channels like Marketo, and I'm kind of one of the early proponents of that. And we went through a big gyration with the rest of the management team around that, and they wanted more analysis and more analysis and more presentations and so on and so forth. And after the second set of presentations, they wanted more presentations, and I'm like, this is the future of marketing. You need to have this. And, if we're going to spend 6 to 9 months talking about it, then I don't want to be here. So kind of, looking at when you're working with folks that don't have a vision of what's going to happen, that don't have a good sense of what needs to be done, that in fact, push back on, really great initiatives. And subsequently, all of that has proved to be true. The early adopters on, advanced marketing technology, have scaled, and those that kind of drag haven't. So I kind of look to find people now that, I really can respect their opinions, that they have expertise, they know what they don't know as well, and that they're people that you really want to work for and can respect them both as an individual and as a professional. But when you're working with people that just don't get it, are not going to get it, you got to kind of say, you know what, unless you're the CEO, time to move along.
Right. And Michael, what would you say is driving you today?
I'm a lot more selective on, what I work on, and what kind of projects and clients I take on. So having been, doing the consulting for years, I have a good sense of, what projects I really do well at, and can add a lot of value to. So I have the kind of capability of kind of saying, no, I don't want to do that, but I'll do that. The one thing I've changed in the past year or so is or 2 years, working with some nonprofits. Many nonprofits are behind in terms of their fundraising sophistication, especially smaller ones, or they're behind in terms of their business processes or their ability to operate digitally. So I find that you can really help some of these nonprofits a lot more, because their resources are leaner and meaner, and they're a little bit behind, and you can kind of get them there faster. So I put about 25% of my time, into working with a couple of nonprofits, one of which works on people that have gaming and gambling addictions. And the COVID has actually increased that, and there's actually a lot of teens now experiencing gaming addictions, and there's a lot of embedded gambling going on in these games. Not only that, but as online gaming and gambling explodes, there needs to be advice and help for folks that run into problems, and there needs to be counseling services for those people, because you can run into huge problems very fast. So I've enjoyed kind of working in that space. It's a brand new space for me, and it's kind of something kind of new and different to look at. So my kind of 80-20 kind of profit and for a nonprofit is kind of continuing on, and that's a big change recently.
Now, Michael, looking into the future, especially the future of B2B sales and marketing, how has the world of B2B changed in terms of sales and marketing?
Yeah, it's constantly changing, and evolving, and certainly technology has aided that. What I see now is that there's just a lot more communication, a lot more content going out to these companies. It's a lot more focused, it's a lot more personalized. So that's the good stuff, in the fact that the content's got a little bit better, it's got a little bit more personalized, and the technology to do virtual demos and use of a video, use of all these different technologies is improved. The downside of that is the clutter has intensified, the competition has intensified. So these people prospects don't have the time to absorb this stuff. So therefore less is getting through, which means marketers have to be much more creative. And what we've done in marketing is we've hired a lot of what I call make the trains run on time marketers. They're process oriented people. They have total value, and they really understand the technology, but they're the least creative people I've ever met. So when you have people when you make the trains run on time marketers, they will push out a lot of content, they'll iterate a lot of content, they'll get it in a lot of different places, and it will generate some leads, but the vast majority of what they push out there will be lost because it's not unique enough, it's not tuned into the buyer enough, there's not enough buyer research. And when I talk to many of these marketers, they've never talked to a prospect, they spend little or no time in the market, so they're not that capable, either from a creativity point of view or from a buyer immersion point of view, to come up with highly relevant content. But they think that more is better, and they just keep cranking it out, and they just keep doing it. And when they don't get performance, they crank out more, or they iterate it, or they tweak it, but they're lacking kind of real understanding of buyers, real value-driven campaigns, focus more on the buyer need and less on the seller need. and they lack that.
And what would you say are some of the biggest challenges for marketers today?
I would say just definitely breaking through the clutter. You know, in light of COVID, certainly there's been a massive change in terms of B2B selling, face-to-face selling. It all came in-house. You know, some people were already largely digital and in-house anyway, so that hasn't changed that much for them. They probably got better at what they were already doing. But for very traditional, you know, if you look at people who are in the sales, manufacturing, or transportation area, they tended to be very traditional. They tended to have a large outside sales team, and they tended to be well paid with large travel budgets. And, you know, they're kind of wining and dining their customers and bringing them to games. It's very relationship oriented. And that has kind of migrated and changed. And some of those people have found it hard to make the change financially, compensation wise, and you know they're really struggling with that. So I think the question will become, you know, what will happen to events as COVID starts to lessen, especially in the States, as it is. You know, will the trade show business come back? Will the corporate entertaining business come back? And some of these people kind of be able to migrate into back into these roles. My guess is some of them won't be able to migrate. And I get my thought is that, you know, I have a client that went from having 2,000 people at a Las Vegas event going virtual with that event and ending up with 11,500 people at the virtual event. So, you know, at 10% of the budget. So when companies see that, you know, this is a huge expense to fly places, to, you know, and it's not, you know, for a 1 hour meeting, somebody's spending 3 days gone. And, you know, certainly there's benefit to face-to-face, and certainly there's benefit to relationship selling, but I think it's going to be a lot more focused. It's going to be a lot reduced.
Michael, what are you observing? How are the most innovative B2B marketers adapting to this new landscape?
Yeah, so some of the best ones are thinking, that they've got to get to know these prospects much better, and not at a database level, but at an intimate level, especially on the enterprise side. So I would say that the successful ones are having much more conversations with their customers. They're listening, they're expressing empathy, they really understand what those customers are trying to do, and they're offering value. They're bringing insights to the table. They're helping their customers. So they kind of have a listen, empathy, help, and then sell approach. And they're thinking about, their brand longer term. They're thinking about, hey, we're in this for the next 10, 20, 30 years. Let's really get to know these customers. Let's build these relationships. If we can get as much business as possible in this quarter, great, but they're not thinking about, that they're just going to pressure these customers so much to buy now that they'll alienate them. So I think a kind of a more strategic value-added approach. The ones that are doing well are doing a lot of customer research, a lot of prospect research. They're defining use cases for their product, and they're showing companies how they get greater value from their platform. So there's a lot going on in terms of customer marketing, customer success. Those are good initiatives kind of going forward. And the best of the best are just highly creative and entertaining in terms of their marketing. They realize that they have to be really, really good. So a while ago, all of the creative agencies were thrown out of corporate marketing. And we had the trains run on time marketers. I think we need to bring in outside creativity back into those organizations. We need to recognize that your average bench marketer is not necessarily highly creative, and we need to complement those folks with resources that are highly creative, because you still got to break through that clutter. So some of those are working on that.
Hey, Michael, what are some of the best practices you're seeing in the field, in the B2B field, when it comes to securing prospect meetings?
Yeah, this is a really important part, because I think that this is what I call the linchpin metric between sales and marketing, or should be the linchpin metric, is net new prospect meetings. It's really what companies should be measuring as a single focus metric, because once you get a meeting and a discussion, now it can be an online meeting, it can be an interactive chat discussion, it can even be back and forth on email. But once you get like an interaction with your prospect, you're really starting to learn. Prospect's talking to you, you're sharing information, it's going back and forth, that allows you to get discovery, that allows you to generate opportunities, that allows you to come back to the client with something that's relevant to them. So the top 5% of B2B reps are doing things really differently. And what I've done is a survey of how they're getting meetings. And I've identified about 20 different approaches that they use. And one of the ones is quite interesting. So most B2B reps study the prospect. So they calling up the prospect. Oh, I see you just got funding, or I see you just got a new CMO, or I see you just got, you're launching a new product, or you're moving plants, or whatever the initiative will be. And certainly there's some kind of benefit to that. If you know that that's going to trigger an investment, that's good. But the better reps do that. In addition, they'll reach out to that company's prospects. They'll study the prospects. They'll look at how those prospects are solving the problems their companies are focused on. And they'll go back to that original prospect and say, hey, I've talked to a couple of your competitors. They seem to be doing a better job on solving this business problem than you. I've noted that there's 3 or 4 different things that they do that you might benefit from. I'd love to talk to you about that. So that's very different than give me a demo, or I'll only take 20 minutes of your time. And most people are fascinated with what their competitors are doing and have very little insight into it. So the top reps get the fact that it's not about the prospect, it's about the prospect's competitors. And that's one thing. Another thing is what I call moderated discovery meetings. Many people will talk to an analyst, they'll talk to a market researcher, they'll participate in a best practices study. So what I do for a lot of my clients is I'll reach out based on a research on best practices, reach out to their prospects, say I'm doing a best practice study on advanced marketing personalization. I'd love to talk to you about that. I'll interview people like Target or P&G or whoever it may be, and I'll bring my client into those conversations as the sponsor of the study. I'll interview the prospect for 15 minutes. Then they'll get to share insights and learnings that are relevant to the prospect, because they'll get to listen to them for 15 minutes. And invariably, the prospect will ask for more information or a demo and so forth. So advanced selling is nearly share insights, share value, help the prospect, and then the prospect will say, well, how do I work with you? Can you tell me more about your company? How does your product work? Could I get a demo? So the more advanced ones are kind of nearly waiting till the prospect nearly invites them into the process, asks them about their product, and they first help them, and then the prospect asks them, well, how can you help me? So it's a little bit of a different dynamic. So kind of if you talk to most heads of sales or heads of marketing and say, well, how did you get your last 100 meetings? Most of them don't really know. And to me, that's shocking, because if you don't know how you're getting your meetings, how you're scaling your meetings, and if you don't know how the best are getting meetings, how are you bringing in best practices? So that's an area I think is really, really important.
Now, Michael, B2B professionals are quite savvy at social media, but they still fail to really leverage it. What else can they do?
Yes, it's a really good point. B2B professionals, they're good at networking. They're good at kind of figuring out who they should talk to and trying to build their network. And, they get the platform and how it works. So on that, I give them like a strong tick. What I don't give them as much of a thick on is they need to have a personal brand. And they need to be somebody that a buyer would go to and say, hey, can you advise me on what I should do here? Or I'm looking at this company, I'm maybe interested in your company, but I don't know what the right criteria should be. How do I or should I, evaluate alternatives here? But they need to have their own brand where they're a trusted resource, and they then need to curate for their network, proactively find articles that are relevant. They need to make their buyers a better buyer. So when their particular content is shared, that the buyers will say, wow, that's great. That's very helpful to me. It's best practices in buying a certain technology, or it's a good way to look at things, or it's sources of places to go for references, whatever it may be. So you need to be your own brand, but your brand also needs to help your customers in a tangible way. And also you need to share your prospects' content and publicize your prospects. So if they won an award, maybe you congratulate them and share that with their network, or maybe you tag them into a research report. So I think that the sales needs to go beyond, LinkedIn is a place to find people to reach out to, and I have a brand that is of value to my customers, and I'm curating that brand and curating that content. So that's the piece I think they miss.
So they should become thought leaders rather than salespeople, right?
Yes, exactly.
Now, Michael, where would you say are sales professionals wasting most of their time when prospecting?
Yeah, I would say overly studying an individual prospect. I see you went to college at this place, or I see you played basketball, or I see they know that, right? You're not giving them anything incremental. They're trying to ingratiate themselves to the prospect and implying that there's some form of connection, but is there really? So if you see my profile and you say I went to Georgetown and I played basketball, you didn't go to Georgetown. You didn't play back. All this kind of pandering of, I know you, I've looked at your profile. I think there's a huge amount of wasted time. I think sales professionals have to realize that, you don't build relationships with prospects. You build relationships with customers. With prospects, you demonstrate your value to them to help them achieve your objectives. You demonstrate that you're a person they want to be in your network. You demonstrate that you can help them. And when they're ready to go through a purchasing process, you're going to be one of those people that they reach out to. But I think B2B sales professionals on the prospecting side are constantly trying to build relationships with prospects. And I think a lot of that is really wasted, and is not really reasonable that these prospects want to have some form of personal relationship with everybody picking up the phone trying to sell them something.
Now, Michael, you mentioned the new sales mantra: listen, express, authentic empathy, help, and then get asked to sell. I mean, this is an evergreen strategy. Why does it work so well today?
When you talk to prospects, they'll say a lot of times that, they don't feel anybody's really listening to them. They'll kind of say, well, I need to solve this need. And, they find that sellers are, they're so quick to book a demo. They're so quick to try and turn it into a sales conversation. But buyers will constantly say, you don't understand me, you don't kind of get me, you haven't spent the time. So you got to respect them and say, is this problem a problem that you're looking to solve? How have you solved this problem before? What are some of the things that you think are working in terms of your current process and not working? If you could kind of, think a year from now and say you've done a great job of solving this problem, what would that feel like? Or who in your industry is doing a great job of solving it? None of those questions have anything to do with my product. None of those questions are a sales pitch, but they're very important in terms of getting the buyer to open up. And then you've got to express some kind of empathy, saying, wow, that must be a challenge, because it seems like if I'm talking about advanced personalization, and I know that Target, is number 8 in the ranking, and I know that Sephora is number 1, we could have a conversation about why that is, and Target would be very interested. We can also say that's a big, it's a big gap to go from number 8 to number 1. And I recognize that. So let's just go from number 8 to number 7, and take that first step on bridging that gap between where you are and best in class. And I'll help you with that. We'll kind of narrow that down and make it tangible. That becomes a much more helpful conversation. And then once they say, well, that would be a good way to think about this problem, I'd like to make that first step, and you seem to be carving off something that's doable. How could you help me? How could you make sure that and then you kind of, that's the buyer asking, how can you help me? And then you say, well, let me think about it. Don't say it on the call, because a lot of salespeople go, oh yeah, that's a no-brainer. We'll get it done in 10 seconds. Say, no, give me like a few days to think about that. I'm going to research it more and I'm going to come back to you. So you're kind of thoughtful and planned. Even if you know exactly what they want, you want to kind of really take the time to take a step back and come back to them with something very tangible. Here's what I heard. This is where you're at. This is where you want to go. This is our first step. It's a very safe, secure step. We're going to limit expenditure in the first step. We're going to limit exposure, but we'll make this step. And then if we make it together, then we'll think about the next step. And I think that buyers are afraid that vendors overpromise and oversell, which they do. So in many cases, people would say, well, I can bring you from 8 to 1 in a day. Once you plug in our platform, everything's going to be wonderful and it's all completely integrated and so forth and so on. And they've heard all that, and it's a lie in nearly all cases. But for a vendor to say, hey, this is a journey. We're not going to get there today. It may take us a year, it may take us 2 years, but if we could achieve this in the next 60 days, would that be a good start? Well, that's a much better way. So you got to build the credibility as well. So the mantra is listen, express authentic empathy, help them offer value, and then sell, or then get asked to sell, is a very, very buyer-friendly way of selling.
Now, Michael, how can our listeners connect with you, and where should they follow you?
Yeah, so I'm a big one on LinkedIn. My website is gotomarketpros.com. They can go there, GOTO market MARKET pros PROS.com. So you can email me at Michael at gotomarketpros.com. You can go to my website at gotomarketpros.com, or you can look me up at LinkedIn under Michael Phelan. I'm pretty active on social media. I share a lot of content, so feel free to follow me, join my network, reach out to me. Always looking to talk to folks looking to grow innovative companies and looking to kind of break out and try new ways of sales and marketing and be more buyer friendly.
And last but not least, Michael, is there one piece of advice that you would really like to convey to future sales and marketing leaders that they should implement in their own leadership?
Yeah, to be be authentic, in terms of, be honest and authentic in terms of what you're offering to the market. Look at your LinkedIn profile, think about, how are you helping your buyers? How are you helping your industry? And be authentic about that. If you say that, your goal is to, help people be smarter and more effective about how they go to market. If that's your goal, say that, helping great companies go to market more efficiently. And if you say that, be that, speak about that, blog about that, be consistent, but think about your value. Why would someone want to engage with you? And don't kind of put up what they think you want to hear, own it and be it. And be consistent. Like any brand, you are a brand, but good brands know what they stand for, and good brands stand for things that are important to customers and are consistent about that. So don't be saying what you think buyers want to hear. Be what they want, and be a helpful resource. So I would say that's very important, and lead your team based on that to say, we want to be authentic, and credible and consistent. So lead, but also help them get to that point where the whole team is viewed as something that buyers would want to engage with, and always test yourself. Am I offering enough value? Am I doing enough for the market? Am I visible enough? Because social media is where a lot of business is done. And you got to think carefully about, how you become not a resource that's just always pushing your own solution, but a resource that's helping buyers, and a resource that buyers would want to talk with, above and beyond a pure sale.
Well, Michael, thank you so much for making time to share your insights and your wisdom into the future of sales and marketing, and reminding us that we all need to evaluate and build our brand, our thought leadership, and practice what you call advanced marketing.
That's great. Excellent. Well, thank you for having me on. I'm really excited to see this. I'll be happy to share this with my followers as well. And it's been a great conversation.
Thank you, Michael.